Dr. Pat Salber, and there's always a lot of talk about obesity in America, but not necessarily just America, right? It's the world. And Doc is on the line right now. Good morning. We're worse off than the rest of the world. We always hear that. Is that true?
Well, it's interesting. We are not actually the fattest country in the world. And our problem with obesity and overweight has actually plateaued, although it's plateaued at a really high level. Can
you hold on just a second? I'm just eating one of my deviled eggs here.
I thought you were going to say a donut.
No donuts for me.
That's good.
I'm on this no carbs thing, and on the diet are deviled eggs. They're delicious. Okay, continue.
Mm-hmm. So, there's a new study that showed that overall in the world, children, we never used to think of kids being overweight or obese, but there's 124 million obese children in the world now, and more than 670 million adults. So the world is getting fatter, and it's not just a cosmetic issue. The problem with obesity is that people get all sorts of problems, in particular type 2 diabetes. Mm-hmm. So it's an issue that we really need to deal with. But, if you Google obesity, you can see that we've been talking about this for more than a decade now as a serious problem, and we've not really made a dent.
So when you say it's 124 million obese children in the world, I find that I would think that number would be higher if it was a world number, right? Yeah. Versus, so is it that bad? What percentage are we talking about? How many children are there in the world?
Oh, I don't know the answer to that question, but it is in the U.S. it's about 1 in 5, and in the UK it's about 1 in 10. But to give you some perspective, when I went to medical school and I trained in endocrinology, so obesity was one of the things that I dealt with, and type 2 diabetes, we didn't see type 2 diabetes in children. As a matter of fact, the name was adult onset diabetes, because it just didn't exist in children. And now we're seeing type 2 diabetes in children as young as 2.
It's funny. We do a radiothon here every year, the Heart Radiothon. And we raise money for heart healthy research and equipment and technology here at our local hospitals. So one pediatrician, we asked, what if there was one thing you want to see in your life that we tackle? And I expected the answer to be cancer, but it was diabetes. He said that's the one thing that he fears is just the worst thing that he sees, and it's increasing today, and is probably the largest problem for a pediatrician. You agree with that?
Yeah, and again, I just want to put it into perspective. This has changed over a relatively short period of time. It wasn't a huge issue when I started training, and now it is a huge issue. And I just want to say a word about type 2 diabetes. It's the most common kind of diabetes. And it isn't, people tend to think, that's just a problem with your glucose, but it isn't. It's a problem with your blood vessels. So type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular disease are intimately linked because of the problems that you get with atherosclerosis or narrowing of the blood vessels. Type 2 diabetes is actually a blood vessel or a vascular disease.
So I'll ask you, what is the answer? We always tried with our kids, tried to be really strict when it came to that. No kid is ever going to want a soda unless if they haven't had a soda, they're not going to want a soda, right? What are you going to?
Yes, if they were living in isolation. The problem is, kids don't live in isolation, and so they go to school and they see all their friends drinking soda. So even if they haven't had one, they'll be. They'll have a desire for it.
There's a difference between talking about a 12-year-old and a 3-year-old. That 3-year-old is not going to school and doesn't need to see. Hopefully, you're measuring on what television the kid gets to see. And I would think those first 5 years are very important.
Well, yeah, indeed they are, but I think this is a problem. It's a huge societal problem, and it's all over the world, and it's the mass marketing of unhealthy food, not just to adults, but as you point out, to children as well. And I don't care how much willpower you have. It's really hard to resist when you see or smell or even taste some of these very caloric dense foods.
So what's the answer? What are parents supposed to do? And grandparents, by the way.
I wish I had the answer. As I said, that if you Google obesity, you can see that we've been struggling with this for a long time. The WHO report that came out that brought us these statistics is calling for every country in the world to take on big food, the huge manufacturers of the kinds of foods that are a problem. But it's difficult because there's not much money or even much support anymore for public health.
Yeah.
When we tried to put a tax on soda in New York, people said, "Oh, you're turning us into a nanny state." Well, we have a choice. We can be a nanny state or we can be a fat state.
Yeah. All right. Interesting, Doc. Thanks so much. We appreciate it.
Sure.
Dr. Pat Salber on childhood obesity. By the way, the population in the United States is what? 323 million, something like that. 323 million people. How many of those are children? 1 in 5 of those kids are suffering from obesity. That's why, the fact that just in the United States there's 323 million people, then you figure in the world, and we are by no means the most populous country in the world. When you say 124 million children in the world are obese, that number doesn't seem so big when you're talking about the entire world. But I guess maybe it is. Yeah. And I didn't realize we're not the fattest country. But what we just learned from the doctor is it's bad, and there's nothing you can do about it.